Well, Rick Osler from Active Feet is back in the studio. Rick, welcome back.
Good afternoon. Good to be here,
mate. This barefoot running thing, it's a craze. Is it a craze? Is it a fad, or is it something that KB, like Tommy Havey used to tell KB, is handball? Same sort of thing. It won't last. Now, handball certainly has. Barefoot running, what's the go?
Yeah, look, there's probably a touch of KB type forward thinking about it. Running's an evolving process, and the surfaces that we train on consistently day in, day out are getting harder and harder, usually on the concrete and so on. And that presents itself a whole lot of challenges, and as the running shoe industry evolves, these things come up. This one here has some really solid foundation with regards to some of the theory behind it, but it's the practical application of some of these things as they evolve that really warrants teasing apart.
Okay. Whenever I think barefoot running,
yep.
Everything I've been taught and felt through my years as an athlete would suggest that there's no way I could run on the concrete or possibly grass for distances at speed in bare feet, because my shins would just go nuts. That's what I'm thinking straight away, the mechanics of it. Yeah,
look, and you're exactly right. The adaptation to that sort of load would be something that would probably break you down, and it'd be very good for our Paul and I, our respective practices, because you'd probably get injured. So it's really the application of some of the principles behind barefoot running, and that may or may not apply to the individual. But again, it's very individual, and that comes down to one, your history. Two is your increments in your load and your volume and what you do. And as a footballer, for example, you'll know that a couple of the clubs have actually banned barefoot shoes and thongs and so on during the summer. And the reason for that is they don't really have control over the application of these sorts of shoes and some of the proposed benefits of wearing these sorts of shoes. And if they had some sort of control and you could watch your player 24 hours a day, then perhaps some of these principles you could implement a little bit into some of the training regime.
So what are the principles of barefoot running?
Look, basically it's designed to facilitate less heel strike and more forefoot running. If you take off your shoes now and run around the office, you'll notice that if you land on the heels, it hurts a fair bit, so it's going to promote you to get up and forward onto the toes. Now, most running coaches are really trying to educate their runners to try and get up more on their midfoot and forefoot.
Yeah, that's true.
At the same time, however, those players have the benefit of programs and so on to facilitate that change. And if you looked at every runner and plotted them on a graph and the top of that bell-shaped curve, if you like, the typical runner doesn't have those resources available, and the adaptation to the sort of stresses that are required to get up and running into barefoot running consistently, or minimalist shoes, or nearly barefoot shoes we call them, that process is quite a big leap for people.
Okay, so, as I say, I spoke to Rick off air before we came in. I've been thinking about this one all week. It's been playing with my head, but it seems to become an argument about shoes versus no shoes.
Right.
And yet I think...
But there is grey area.
But the big issue is actually loading.
Right.
So that whatever you do, whatever you decide to do, whatever your biomechanics are, if you take time and adjust to it, you may well be able to adjust to any sort of surface with any sort of shoe, and you may have the weirdest alignment. I remember getting a shock seeing Mona run once, and I hadn't seen him for years running, and I got behind him and I thought, my God, his legs are going everywhere. But he's run for years. He's adapted to that. So then it becomes, we've got to be careful about saying, shoe or not shoe. If you change whatever you're doing right now and you do it quickly enough, you are going to get in a strife. And alternatively, if you reckon you've got the perfect setup, if you run too far, you are still going to get injured. Doesn't matter. If you do too much, you're still going to get injured.
Right. So what are we saying here?
So what we're saying is that the shoes have got to be taken in, it's not shoe versus not shoe. It's actually, let's look at the loading first of all. Control the loading. If we're going to do something different, you've got to gradually introduce the loading. So with for example, I don't reckon I'd last 2 minutes barefoot running, but with time...
But if you start at 30 seconds...
Yeah, if I start at 30 seconds and gradually build up.
Carbs from Mill Park Physio, keeping you fit and well. Our special guest in the studio today is Rick Osler from Active Feet. If the shoe fits, it's from Active Feet. We're talking barefoot running today and the benefits thereof. And you asked that very question to Rick before the break, and we've given him time to have a think about that, and he's come up with an answer. Rick, what are the benefits?
The benefits really relate to the joint range of motion being enhanced, and therefore the secondary range that muscles operate within, and the strength gains that come from that. So really it's about, we have joints for a reason. The joints are designed to move, and it's encouraging more movement in those joints and therefore more strength adaptation or more strength development from that.
So I'm just reading into this. So can shoes hide some of the problems or biomechanic problems?
Oh, look, they certainly can. The average plotter lands on the heel, and if we took them out of a shoe, they wouldn't. But they wouldn't be able to run either because they wouldn't be able to adjust to that foot position. So the shoe can become a little bit of a cushion and can become a little bit of a mechanism for people to cheat a little bit and get away with perhaps poor biomechanics or poor running form.
So, Rick, have you ever suggested to one of your athletes to go, have you actually ever had them running bare feet?
Yeah, look, I have. I do. I've got one patient in particular who I've been managing for years. He's been Ironman triathlete, a very competitive athlete. He ran the Marathon des Sables, that 240-kilometre run across the Moroccan desert. And
we've had a boy in doing that.
What
was his name? Your mate? Scotty
Nathan.
Yeah, go on.
I'd sort of been managing him for years and had some orthotics in place and good footwear and so on, and did everything right. Very diligent. Pretty anal, you call him.
Yeah.
Kept breaking down, always holding off injuries, just gradually holding them at bay, and could never really get right into it. And he'd come to me one day and he said, "Look, I want to explore this forefoot, barefoot running type stuff. I want to get up and load my forefoot a little bit more." And because when he strikes the ground on his heel, he really rolls in heavily. When he gets up onto his toes, he actually doesn't roll in so much. And so we discussed it at length, and it was quite an interesting case. So I spent a bit of time with him, and he took a year aside from racing, did no racing, no squad training, no anything, just to condition his body with stretching and strengthening exercises, or not so much stretching, but the dynamic stuff, just to facilitate that change so that his body could adapt to running up on his forefoot and midfoot. Now, that was a year, and he set himself up with a chiropractor. He had his myotherapy, which he did every 2 weeks, and then we consulted regularly with regards to the sorts of increments that he'd have to attain to be able to facilitate that posture whilst he was running. And that took him a year to do it. And from that year, we're back into racing again. His ITB, so his knee sort of pain that he'd had, his shin issues that we'd been always just holding off in the past, we knocked them all over. But it took him a year to condition his body just to facilitate that change from being a heel striker to a forefoot striker.
Fascinating.
These sorts of shoes help facilitate that change. But
we couldn't, Cobes and I couldn't do that in a year. We haven't got the time to be focusing on that.
Yeah, well, most people are flat out being conditioned and disciplined enough to stick to their training program, let alone condition their body with all the side sort of stuff just to be able to run.
But in an ideal world, are we putting our kids in shoes that are too restrictive too early?
It's an interesting question. I mean, we just haven't looked at stuff over a long enough period. Growing up on concrete, the same repetitive, hard, flat surfaces day in, day out, our feet aren't designed for that.
Yeah.
And as a result, all of us are built slightly differently, and those repetitive stresses add up, and they come to a total or a cost to us at some stage. And shoes are designed with some features to try and nullify some of those things.
Let's get to Frank in Baronia, who's on the line, giving us a call on 9429 1116. G'day, Frank.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, man.
So it'd be something like clogs with the Dutch, would it?
Yeah.
What do you say?
The clogs with the Dutch.
About?
Because they're used to it. The Dutch were in the clogs around. The
They're
Dutch.
used to it. Right.
Yeah.
Bud.
There's a little bit of, you've probably heard the quote too, that how many Kenyans suffer from overpronation? You're sort of leaning toward the same thing.
No.
If we could hear you, Frank, I'm not sure you could hear us, but we certainly could hear you. So what was that about Kenyan? Sorry, Frank was talking.
Well, that's often a line that, that I see everyone who's read Born to Run, and there's quite a few people who've read that one. Do Kenyans suffer from overpronation? Well, do Kenyans grow up in heeled shoes from the age of 2 right through their schooling? Do they walk around in heels at work in business and then expect that their feet can all of a sudden get flat, plus load, plus run, arguably with a few more kilos on us than the average Kenyan? And usually the answer to that is no, and often will break down.
Well, Kiwi Jim off the SMS tells us growing up in New Zealand, didn't wear shoes until we were 12 years old, barefoot to school, played rugby in barefoot, even on those frosty mornings, Copes.
By gum. That'd be hard.
That would be difficult.
That would be very difficult.
It'd be frosty on their feet.
Yeah, but I like the idea of kids in. I like the idea of kids in bare feet.
My little man loves his bare feet action.
Yeah.
Hates shoes, just keeps ripping them off.
Yeah. No, how old is he?
He's only 4.
Yeah, that's not bad.
The best shoe's no shoe. Certainly podiatrically, that's what we talk about. Shoes are designed principally for protection. If you're going to stand on a bit of glass or a nail and you cut yourself, well, you put a shoe on. But otherwise, get the shoes off.
And the other thing is they talk about the natural environment, but like you said before, we're on concrete. That ain't natural.
It's not. And if you've seen how many bones and joints are in the feet, there's a lot of them. And to put that in the same repetitive, hard, flat surface, it creates some issues for us.
Hamish is in Camberwell. G'day, Hamish.
G'day, Carl. How are you, mate?
Good, pal.
Good. A couple of things. I understand this anatomically because of what I do, but if I'm a hand therapist, so if I put a patient's hand in a splint for 2 weeks, I understand that the hand and the wrist gets weaker. I've been wearing orthotics for quite some time to deal with Achilles tendonitis. I've got rid of the orthotics and started running barefoot a couple of times a week, and the Achilles tendonitis has diminished in proportion to the strength in my feet. And I really feel that there is something to this. I agree with what you were saying. Everything needs to be taken gradually, and I've certainly done that. But I do think there is a lot to this.
Okay.
I think you're right, and there's not a whole lot that hangs together with orthotics and Achilles pain, by the way, just as a side note. And the concept of just jacking up the heel height progressively higher to try and stop that Achilles from being drawn out or stretched is pretty flawed. The problem is when you've got someone that's putting a heel raise or orthotic in place, they haven't really got control over your compliance, which is your ability to follow instructions. And unfortunately, practitioners are in the business of trying to help you get better. And sometimes that's a disservice to you.
Very interesting, this topic. I'm glad you brought this up, Cobes. I'm fascinated by this.
I'm a bit terrible. I'm not trying it.
A couple of minutes to 2 o'clock. Rick Osler from Active Feet and Cobes are with us, keeping you fit and well, Cobes. And you've got the marathon this week.
I can't wait. It's a great day. So if you're not doing it this week, I know it's full, but get yourself ready and do the Melbourne Marathon next year. It's great to work. Hey, listen, do you stock minimalist runners in your store?
We haven't got them at this time. The trick with that, not because we don't believe or think it's got a place, the trick with it, if we sold a minimalist shoe, we sort of need to sell a personal trainer or an exercise physiologist with the shoe to ensure that your body can adapt to the load, because otherwise we'll see people looking for a panacea, they think the shoe will fix everything, and away they go, and in 4 weeks they come back with sore Achilles, and that's an adaptation or failure to adapt stress, and that's difficult. So
could people who are interested in this and maybe wanting to investigate using these sort of shoes come into an Active Feet store and have a chat to one of the podiatrists there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about it all day, every day, so we can really help set you up in terms of the information and a bit of background, and then you can you've got the facts on the table and you can draw your conclusions and go from there.
Excellent. Well, that's I'm really pleased you brought that up, Cobes. That's a very good discussion.
Thanks, Harv.
Good stuff from you. Now, good luck on the weekend. We think it's fantastic you're out there having a crack at the marathon.
Thank you.
Go get them.
And you'll be there next year with me, won't you?
I'm coming next year. I'm just building up. Adaptation, it's called.
Yes.
Slow and steady progress. Getting ready for the big one next year.
Good on you, Harv.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Cobes. Keeping you fit and well on half time. Great stuff. Check out Active Feet. Pop into one of the stores if you want to find out more about the minimalist shoes and the effects on your body and your athletic prowess.